The village appeared on the road at the exact moment I stopped trusting maps and my own memory. The navigator showed nothing, the signal dropped every few minutes, and the sign with the village name was so rusted that the letters had melted into one shapeless stain. I stopped not out of curiosity, but out of exhaustion. The road had been stretching on for hours, and at some point time stopped feeling linear and turned into something thick and fog-like. The village was quiet, not dead. Quiet in a deliberate way, as if everyone had agreed not to make noise. The houses stood straight, not abandoned, but not alive either. People moved slowly. They didn't look at the sky. They didn't look at their phones. And most importantly, no one was in a hurry. The clock in the central square showed 2:17 p.m. I noticed it immediately because the numbers were too sharp, too precise. 30 minutes passed. Nothing changed. An hour passed. Still 2:17. I assumed the clock was broken, but inside the local shop there was a digital one on a shelf. It showed the same time. The shopkeeper, a man around 40 with a perfectly calm face, said everything here worked just fine. I asked him what time it was. He answered without hesitation, 2:17. When I told him time wasn't moving, he looked at me as if I had said something strange, but not offensive. There were no children in the village, no elderly people either. Everyone looked roughly the same age, fully grown, without exhaustion, without youthful sharpness. I decided to stay the night because I didn't feel like leaving. The hotel was open. They gave me a key immediately. No documents, no questions. There was no mirror in the room. I noticed that at night, when I realized I didn't want to sleep. The clock on my phone was frozen. Messages wouldn't send. I lay down, but sleep never came. And with that came a strange feeling, like I had been here for a long time, even though I had arrived today. The scariest part wasn't that time had stopped. The scariest part was that no one cared. The next day, if the word day even applied here, I started asking questions. People answered willingly, but lightly, as if words carried no weight. They said time was moving, just not the way it does elsewhere. They said it was safer here. They said no one aged, no one got sick, no one died. I asked how long they had lived here. No one gave a clear answer. Some said a long time. Some said always. A woman in the library told me she came for a few days once and stayed because she realized she didn't want to go anywhere else. I noticed there was no cemetery in the village. When I asked about it, they said simply that it wasn't needed. In the evening, I met a man who felt different. He was tense. His eyes moved too fast. His movements were sharp. He was the first one to ask me what time it was. When I said I didn't know, he smiled with relief. He told me, "You can't know the exact time here, because once you do, you start looking for it. And when you look for time, you start looking for yourself." He explained that the village was a place between moments. People arrived here when something in their lives finally broke. A choice, guilt, fear, loss. Time doesn't move here because time is tied to decisions, and here no decisions are required. I asked if it was possible to leave. He went quiet, then said yes, but not everyone succeeds. To leave, you have to leave something behind. Not an object, a part of yourself. I started noticing details. No one spoke about their past in specifics. No one talked about plans. No one mentioned the names of people they loved. And then I realized I couldn't remember where I was going before this village. I couldn't remember why I was on the road at all. My name was still with me. but it sounded strange, like a foreign word I hadn't used in years. Panic hit me. The first real emotion since I arrived. And that was a bad sign, because in this place, emotions are cracks. I decided to leave. The car started without a problem, but the road looped. Every turn brought me back to the same square with the clock. People watched calmly. No judgment, no sympathy. The man found me by the car and said I was holding on to myself too tightly. He said the exit only appears when you are ready to stop being who you were, not to die, not to disappear, to forget. I got angry. I yelled. I argued that memory is what makes a person human. He answered that memory is an anchor, not a core. That night, I realized I was starting to forget faces, not specific ones, all of them. People became shapes. Voices became background noise. My name started losing meaning. I wasn't scared because I was disappearing. I was scared because I was starting not to care. At dawn, if that word had meaning here, I walked out of the village on foot. No car, no phone, no watch. The road was empty, but this time it didn't loop back. When I reached the highway, the navigator worked. The sun moved. Time flowed again. I drove on and stopped in another city. There were children, old people, noise, chaos, normal life. But I realized I couldn't remember my job, who I loved, where I was going home to. I left the village, but I paid the price. I live in time now, but without roots. Sometimes I think the ones who stayed made the smarter choice. Because time moves, but it always takes something. And there are places where it simply stands still, waiting for you to decide what you're willing to sacrifice. Time moved again, but it felt artificial, like a borrowed rhythm. Days passed because clocks said they did, not because I felt them. I tried to rebuild myself from fragments. I rented a room. I found temporary work. I learned my routine by repetition, not memory. People asked normal questions. What do you do? Where are you from? I answered vaguely, because specifics triggered nothing. At night, I dreamed of the village without seeing it. Just the feeling, stillness, safety without warmth. I noticed something else. Whenever I stopped and did nothing, truly nothing, time around me slowed. Traffic lights felt late. Conversations dragged. The world resisted motion the same way the village resisted change. I started wondering if I had really left, or if the village had simply learned how to follow me. I searched for it online. Nothing. No photos, no mentions, just blank spaces where results should be. But once, late at night, I found a forum post with no replies. A single sentence. I stopped for gas and lost 3 years. That sentence stayed with me longer than anything else I read. I realized then that the village wasn't a place you escape from. It was a condition. I met someone who had the same look I once saw in the man from the village. Tension, alert eyes, controlled movements. He noticed me first, asked if I ever felt like time was pretending. I didn't answer right away. He nodded like that was confirmation enough. We talked without sharing details. He said there were more of us, not many. People who slipped through and kept moving, but left something essential behind. He called it temporal debt. You stop paying attention to time and eventually it notices. He warned me not to stop for too long, not to settle too comfortably. The ones who try to rebuild a normal life are the first to vanish, not die, vanish, as if they finally agree to stop resisting. I asked him where they go. He said they go nowhere. They return to between moments. Before we parted, he said something I didn't like. The village doesn't trap people. It waits for consent. That night, I dreamed clearly for the first time. I was standing on the road outside the village. The sign was clean now, perfectly readable. It had my name on it. After that, memories began leaking back, but distorted. Not events, emotions without context, guilt without cause, fear without threat, love without a face. It was worse than forgetting. I understood then why the village stripped specifics. Meaning is dangerous when time stands still. Meaning demands movement. I tried to force my past back. Photos, old messages, records. They felt like evidence from someone else's life. The more I pushed, the heavier time became. Hours dragged. Minutes stretched. I started losing track of what I was doing mid-action. The world responded with resistance, like friction against my thoughts. I knew what was happening. I was slowing down, not physically, existentially. The village was pulling, not aggressively, patiently. It didn't need urgency. It had all the time I didn't. I returned to the road. Driving helped, motion mattered. As long as I moved, time behaved. I never stayed in one place more than a few days. I avoided routines, avoided attachments. People passed through my life like brief signals. I became good at leaving before questions formed. Sometimes, late at night, I'd feel it again. That soft pressure, that invitation, the promise of rest without consequence. No decisions, no loss, just suspension. I understood now why people stayed. The village wasn't horror, it was mercy. But mercy has a cost, and the price is identity. The moment you stop needing to be someone, time stops needing to move. I don't know how long this will last. Maybe movement is only a delay. Maybe everyone eventually slows enough to be collected. I write this not as a warning, but as a marker. If you ever find yourself in a place where clocks work but time doesn't, don't ask how long you've been there. Ask what you're ready to give up. If the answer is nothing, leave immediately. Keep moving. Movement is expensive, but it's honest. Somewhere behind me, between moments, there's a village where the clock still shows the same time. It isn't waiting for me to return. It knows I will. Time always collects its debts. I started measuring my life in motion instead of dates, miles instead of days, highways instead of addresses. As long as the scenery changed, I felt anchored to something real. Motion created proof. When I stopped, even briefly, that proof thinned. Time behaved like it was watching me, waiting for hesitation. The village never appeared directly again, but its fingerprints did. A gas station where every clock showed a different time and none of them advanced. A motel where the clerk greeted me by name, even though I was sure I had never been there before. A stretch of road that felt longer on the way back than forward, like distance itself was selective. I learned to trust discomfort. Comfort was dangerous. Comfort invited stillness. The world frayed at the edges when time grew tired of pretending. Sounds flattened, colors dulled. People repeated phrases without realizing it. I also learned something worse. The more I tried to define who I was, the stronger the resistance became. Names, histories, goals, they added weight. When I thought about the future, hours dragged. When I thought about the past, minutes collapsed. The lighter I kept myself, the easier movement felt. No plans, no attachments, just direction. That realization scared me more than the village ever did, because it meant survival and erasure were beginning to overlap. To keep moving, I had to keep letting go, and I couldn't tell where adaptation ended and disappearance began. I met a woman on a night bus heading nowhere specific, the kind of route that exists only because someone needs it to. She had the same look I'd seen before: awareness without panic, recognition without curiosity. She described the village before I ever mentioned it: the stillness, the relief, the absence of pressure, the cost. She said she had never been there, but she had almost stopped once. Almost mattered. Almost was the last clean exit. She believed the village existed because the human mind cannot tolerate unresolved moments. We invent places to store them, between seconds, between choices, between regret and acceptance. She said some people stop because they are tired, others because they are afraid. The worst ones stop because they are relieved. She asked me if I missed it. I tried to answer honestly and realized I didn't have the language. Missing implies loss. Loss implies ownership. I wasn't sure I had ever owned what I left behind, or if I had simply refused to keep carrying it. She told me she keeps moving for the opposite reason I do: not to escape the village, but to prove it wrong. When we parted, she said something I still think about when the road gets quiet. Time isn't cruel, it's honest. It moves whether you're ready or not. Stopping it is what breaks people, not the other way around. I don't think there is an ending to this, just different speeds. Some people slow down gradually until the world lets them rest. Others keep moving until motion replaces identity. I don't know which one I am yet. I'm still moving, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of habit, sometimes because stopping feels heavier than continuing. I've accepted that one day I might slow down without noticing. No dramatic moment, no realization, just a pause that stretches too long, and the clock will freeze again at a familiar time. If that happens, I hope I remember this much: time isn't something you escape. It's something you negotiate with. Every day, every step, every decision to keep going despite uncertainty. Somewhere between moments, the village remains unchanged. Not a trap, not a refuge, just an option that waits patiently. It doesn't chase, it doesn't warn. It simply exists for those who need permission to stop being someone. As long as I can still see the road ahead of me, I choose motion. Even knowing that motion costs memory. Even knowing that one day it may cost meaning. Because moving forward, even blindly, still feels more honest than standing still and pretending nothing is being lost.